DeSantis and Musk cuddle up. How cozy. I have explained to you that when narcissists come together, there can sometimes be an almighty collision. Sparks fly, there's an explosion. I've talked about this in the 2 videos, When Narcissists Collide, parts 1 and 2, giving you a run-through of certain categories, sub-schools, of narcissists and how they interact with others in a social setting, in a familial setting, in a romantic setting, in a work setting. There are other instances where 2 narcissists can rub along okay together. In other instances, you get what's called narcissistic cementation, where the 2 bond together. They become like 2 orbiting stars, fulfilling one another's need. And I've given you examples of where that has occurred in romantic settings. Hillary and Bill Clinton being an example of that, and within the fictional realm, Francis Urquhart and his wife, or if you prefer the American version, Francis and Claire Underwood. But what about in a business or political setting? Might there be an instance of narcissistic cementation occurring there? Well, the New York Times reports DeSantis set to announce 2024 run on Twitter with Elon Musk. So along come 2 narcissists, different types, but narcissists nevertheless. Adding a twist to the beginning of his presidential campaign, the Florida governor is expected to appear on a live audio conversation with Mr. Musk, the social platform's owner, on Wednesday evening. Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida is planning to announce the start of his 2024 presidential campaign on Wednesday in a live audio conversation on Twitter with Elon Musk, the platform's polarizing owner, according to people with knowledge of his plans. Okay, so pausing there, what's happening? Well, DeSantis needs to assert control over as many people as possible for the purpose of his political ambitions. He's not as widely known as his competitor, former President Donald J. Trump, and he needs to increase his publicity. Therefore, what better way than with a kiss, kiss, bang, bang of partnering up with someone who is globally recognized, Elon Musk, but also just happens to have a rather large social media platform. Ka-ching. Thus, for DeSantis, it makes sense because it is a conduit to enable him to assert control over other people. And his narcissism can put to one side the fact that Elon Musk is a little bit of a polarizing character, that he can be somewhat maverick in his behaviors. What about the situation for Elon Musk? What draws him in? Well, of course, there's an opportunity for him to be able to have a conversation about politics, thus enabling him to assert control over lots of people by getting involved in the presidential race. Evidently, he's not going to throw his own hat into the ring, but like so many narcissists, he wants to be seen as a kingmaker. And therefore it appeals to him to cozy up with Mr. DeSantis and allow him that platform. By doing, of course, by way of a conversation, not just saying, okay, Ron, away you go, but rather you and I are going to have a sit down and a chin wag. And thus, you have the cementation on this occasion because it caters for both their needs. Mr. DeSantis' entry into the Republican primary race against former President Donald Trump has been widely expected, but the decision to do so with Mr. Musk adds a surprising element and gives Mr. DeSantis access to a large audience online, residual benefit, means of control. The event on Twitter Spaces, which is planned for 6 p.m. Eastern, injects a level of risk into a rollout that is expected to be carefully scripted and ensures that Mr. DeSantis' first impression as a presidential candidate will be aligning himself with Mr. Musk, an eccentric businessman who is ranked at times as the world's richest man. One challenge for Mr. DeSantis as he enters the 2024 race will be competing for attention with Mr. Trump, who for decades has shown a knack for commandeering the limelight. Mr. Trump's aides have signalled for months that he plans to return to Twitter sooner rather than later. Mr. Musk already lifted the ban on the former president that was imposed when Twitter was a public company. In addition to his Twitter event, Mr. DeSantis is expected to appear on Wednesday evening on Fox News in an interview with Trey Gowdy, a former congressman from South Carolina, according to the network. A super PAC backing Mr. Trump mocked the plans. "This is one of the most out-of-touch campaign launches in modern history," said Caroline Leavitt, a spokeswoman for Make America Great Again, the pro-Trump group. "The only thing less relatable than a niche campaign launch on Twitter is DeSantis' after-party at the uber-elite Four Seasons Resort in Miami." Mr. Musk said at an event with the Wall Street Journal on Tuesday that he was not formally throwing his support behind Mr. DeSantis or any other Republican, hedging his bets for the purposes there of asserting control. On Monday, he retweeted a video of the presidential kickoff event for Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, another Republican contender. Under Mr. Musk, Twitter has cultivated a more Republican audience. This month, Tucker Carlson, the fired former Fox News star, announced he would host his popular show on Twitter. The DeSantis event with Mr. Musk will be moderated by David Sachs, a Republican donor who is a supporter of the governor and is close to Mr. Musk. Mr. Sachs, a technology entrepreneur and investor, donated $50,000 to Mr. DeSantis' state political committee ahead of his re-election, campaign finance records show. He has spoken positively of the governor's handling of the coronavirus pandemic in Florida. "He was the first governor to stop these insane lockdowns," Mr. Sachs said on Bloomberg TV in 2021. I respect that. In choosing spaces, Mr. DeSantis is relying on an audio-only streaming tool with a history of bugs and failures. Mr. Musk has used the feature regularly in the 6 months since he bought Twitter for $44 billion in October, appearing on Spaces to talk about the state of his various businesses and give interviews, which draw tens of thousands of listeners. Mr. Musk has said he voted for President Biden in the 2020 election, but has since been critical of him and his administration, which has a frosty relationship with Tesla, his electric car company. The billionaire has said it is difficult for Mr. Biden to stay in touch with voters at the age of 80. When asked about Mr. Biden in an interview on CNBC last week, Mr. Musk said he wanted a normal human being to lead the country. "It's not simply a matter of do they share your beliefs," he said, "but are they good at getting things done?" While Mr. Musk has called himself a moderate, donating relatively small amounts to both Republicans and Democrats in the past, he has shifted his support in recent years towards the right. On Twitter, he has engaged with and shared right-wing conspiracy theories, paranoia, including one about the October attack on Paul Pelosi, the husband of former Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Mr. Musk has voiced his support for Mr. DeSantis, including last July when he tweeted that the Florida governor would easily win if matched up against Mr. Biden in 2024. And in November, he responded in the affirmative when asked by a Twitter user if he would support Mr. DeSantis in that year's election. Last summer, when Mr. DeSantis was asked about Mr. Musk's potential support, the Florida governor cracked, "I welcome support from African Americans. What can I say? Mr. Musk is white and from South Africa." In Florida, Mr. DeSantis has supported legislation intended, in his words, to protect people against Silicon Valley elites. He has also criticised tech companies for their efforts to remove misinformation from their platforms, which he has likened to an assault on free speech and truth undertaken in concert with government officials. You've seen the administrative state collude with big tech to censor truthful information, whether it's people attacking COVID lockdowns, whether it's them questioning the efficacy of masks or school closures, Mr. DeSantis said in an April speech to the Conservative Heritage Foundation. There was a concerted effort for big tech companies to do what government is never permitted to do, directly rather. Accordingly, an interesting cozying up here and an example of narcissistic cementation, where the needs of two narcissists are being met by working in tandem together. It's only going to be short-lived in terms of a conversation, but voicing support for DeSantis, as I've explained, it demonstrates the way that both individuals gain from this, but remember, both need to maintain the assertion of control. And, as we've seen with Elon Musk, there's been repeated instances where his behaviour has been somewhat volatile Not in the sense of him going nuts, but with rather unusual decisions that he makes. And it would be a factor that would play into his relationship with Mr. DeSantis, and one that is worth watching to see what happens next in terms of the dynamic between the two. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.